Hello, everybody, and welcome. Our topic today is going to be how to keep your patients coming back for more treatments, more procedures, more of the good stuff. And my name is Mara Shorr. I am one of the partners here at Shorr Solutions, and the other partner in our glorious, as Tani said, award-winning practice management consulting company. The other founding partner here is Jay Shorr. And as I always love to say, Jay is not only my business partner, but Jay is my dad. So my dad first. So with all of that being said, you're going to see some fun stuff. You're going to hopefully learn a lot. You're going to enjoy a healthy bit of banter because that is who we are. We are nothing if not a father-daughter team. So with that, as Tony had said, please feel free, put the Q&A, any questions you have in the chat box. So, and we are proud to be here for this particular AMS webinar sponsored by Weave. We love everything about AMS and with Weave. So with that, and they say that you always turn into your parents. So I used to laugh when Jay used to always tell everybody, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just looking at my second screen. So everybody that's watching, I'm not ignoring you when I look away. I'm just looking at my second screen. But Jay, what an honor to be turning into you before everybody's very eyes.
Well, I really hope you don't turn too much into me.
Well, that's what laser hair removal is for, in case a beard ever develops, but it shouldn't. We should be good.
All right.
Now, let's get started. So with that, we are going to go first things first, right? As we talk about how to keep your patients coming back for more. So with that, let's get started. We are going to talk about first and foremost, collecting contact information. Now, Jay, do you want to talk a little bit about not only the importance of how to answer the phone and answering the phone with a smile, but the importance of collecting contact information?
Well, first and foremost, when the phone rings, it's how you answer the phone so that the person on the other end, whether it is an existing client slash patient or a prospective client slash patient, that you can hear and that patient hears that smile. There's nothing worse than somebody on the other end of the phone being greeted with a nonverbal smile, because they'll be able to hear it, they'll be able to see it. Once that's done and you answer that phone, good afternoon, and well, you could say, good afternoon, AMS Cosmetic Surgery Center. This is Jay, and I can help you. You allow that person to know that they've reached the actual right person. Whether or not the recipient is speaking to, very rarely, the doctor, but it's usually the director of first impressions, previously known as the receptionist. They want to know that they've received and they've been contacted the right person, that be able to either push them off to the person that can answer all the questions or that can answer the questions. And the reason for contact and collecting all of the caller's information is trifold. One, asking for the name so that you can address that person by name, respectably. And if they give you that name, doctor or Mr. or whatever, never, I always say, only speak to them in the name that they share with you. If they address themselves as Mr. So-and-so, Miss, Mrs., Doctor, always refer to them as that, unless they give you that liberty to speak to them in that manner, because many people want to be spoken to in the title that they share with you.
And I will say that that is something, Jay, because we work with practices across the country, and we always say that there's different levels of formality, even in different geographic areas. And so when we talk with our clients, we say right off the bat in their phone script, let's talk about what level of formality. Is this just like you said, salutation, last name, salutation, first name? Is this really a matter of looking at sir, ma'am? Some people, it's, in the South, it is very common that it's yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Other people go, who are you calling ma'am? That makes me feel old. My mother is a ma'am. I'm not a ma'am. And I think that it really depends on the level of formality by the practice. So if you're ever uncertain as far as that level of formality, check with practice management, like the manager of your particular practice.
And lastly, the more important reason is asking the caller, may I have your phone number in case we get disconnected? Because the number that they're calling from may not be their contact number of preference. They may be calling from a different number, but we'll never have that number. And then always get the contact information as an email address that you can address it this way. May I have your email address, because you're going to get opt-in, so that we can communicate with you in the future, put you on our e-blast, give you educational information. Try to use that educational information so it's not as much as a salesy technique. And then many times beyond the educational level of our e-blast information, we will offer specials that only people that are on our e-blast list would be able to receive. And once they give you that permission, you've gotten their name, you've gotten their phone number, and you've gotten their email address, the ones that they prefer to give you. And then you go on from there.
And if you are like Jay, you're still giving out an email address that people, you give to people that you really don't want to hear from. So you want to make sure that not only that, you let them know that appointment confirmations will be going to that particular email address as well. So that's always important that we want to know that that's where that information goes. So with that, we're going to continue on. And I will say, Jay, one thing, you and I were at an office visit about 2 or 3 years ago now. And I was having this conversation with somebody at the front desk. It was a plastic surgery and dermatology practice. And I was having this conversation just like you and I were just talking about. And I said, the best scripting is, and may I have, your first and last name and the best number to call you back in case we get disconnected. Well, sure enough, the call gets disconnected, right? This is the age we live in. Cell phones break up, calls end. Somebody accidentally does you hang up with somebody with the side of your chin. It happens. And she looks at me from as the caller had, the call had accidentally ended. And she says, well, what do I do now? And I said, you need to call them back, Mary. That's what we need to do. And she looked at me stunned. So we want to make sure, as much as we think, oh, this is just the script, this is actually an instruction. So let's continue on, and we're going to go to some of the next steps, because what we've just told you is the basics, right? The very basic of how to answer that phone and get that conversation started. Now, what we also want to do is look for software, and we want to look for software that's going to help kick things up a notch, right? And I will say, which we can say now that Weave is a sponsor of this webinar, we always love all of these items, but we can fully admit, yes, Weave offers all of these things. So you want a system that syncs your patient or client information, depending if you are a med spa, sometimes places call them their clients, but quite honestly, we always refer to your patients as patients. You're performing medical procedures, right? So it needs to be that they sync the caller information with your EMR, your EHR, your practice management software. So that is something that is so incredibly helpful and important, especially if you may be doing reconstruction work and have insurance and billing. Then you're able to see, are there, do you have outstanding fees that are due? Obviously, if you're a cosmetic practice, I shouldn't say obviously, Jay, sometimes we run into practices that are still billing behind, as much as that really gets our goat, so to speak. But with that, you shouldn't have any billing if you are in a cosmetic practice. You also want upcoming appointment reminders. This is available for any family member that you're able to be connected to. And when we say that, that's if you're able to connect patients via the EMR system because they have given and been granted you HIPAA compliance, and you've signed off that these are patients you can share information about. I will give, for example, any doctor's appointment I go to that always asks, Jay, you are able to have access to any of my medical information. I don't know if you knew that, but why not tell you now with all the, people listening?
So the next thing you know is something that
Thank you.
you're able to check overdue balances. This way, if there was a balance from an additional procedure that may not have been paid for, that was then billed afterwards, you want to know that when the patient comes in, there will be a pop-up that allows an overdue notice or an overdue balance that you can collect when they come in. All right. and then any tasks for the caller while you have them on the phone. Whether or not there's any special notes or follow-ups from that thing, but the beauty about having good HIPAA compliant software is that you want to have all of these things to be able to weave into your practice.
I like
How
how
do you
you
like
did that,
that
Jay.
one?
I like that. And we always reiterate to our clients about their patients something that Jay, you very specifically just said, right? The technology that patients are using, or that practices, I'm sorry, are using to communicate with their patients needs to be HIPAA compliant. And Jay, you always say, we've been practicing HIPAA since before HIPAA was HIPAA, right? So Jay, you were just like your Uncle Sammy, you were cool before there was cool, right? So with that, we always want to make sure, because I hear so often practices say, oh, I don't need to worry about that because I just text with my phone, right? Or I just answer patients on Instagram. So I want to reiterate, those are not HIPAA compliant channels, right? Texting just through your normal phone, your normal cell phone is not HIPAA compliant. So that's why it's important to go through a party like, and again, while we hope it's Weave, you need to know that whatever channel you're using is HIPAA compliant. So with that, we're going to keep on going with the goal of how to keep your patients coming back for more. And you really want to automate as much as possible, right? That's the key. We're not saying you ever need to, when we tell you about automating, it has nothing to do with getting rid of your amazing team members. They're great team members. By all means, keep the amazing team members, because good people are hard to find. Jay and I know this. We're going through all sorts of client delight where everybody's looking for people, but you want to make life easier on your awesome team members. So,
Not only are good people hard to find, but great people are more difficult to keep.
and we want to keep the great people. So, what I want to talk about here is a couple of things. And Jay, I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to let you do a little math genius on the next slide here. So, want to make sure with you are sending out reminders for upcoming appointments, right? This means that if somebody has an appointment in 1 week, in 3 days, in 2 days, in one day, the morning of, that we're sending out automated appointment reminders. It shouldn't be taking the valuable time of your team members and the actual human beings that are sitting there to pick up the phone and call. I will tell you, people other than Jay don't tend to pick up their phone these days. People are much more likely to want to receive that text message. So with that, we want to look at automations. And I will tell you that since 2020, no shows have gotten higher, and people just in the year of 2020, with all the shutdowns and reopens and shutdowns, people forgot how to use a calendar and make appointments. And so there was just a lot of forgetfulness and no shows. And we're seeing that at a pretty strong rate. Now, Jay, I'm going to let your math brain chime in here. For this one, automations, and I'm going to lead you right into this, Jay, automations when it's time for a retreatment. So let's talk about and we'll talk about that in a second, when it comes to a patient, the necessity of how to have them schedule their next appointment at checkout. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's say that they didn't. What is the importance of the dollar value of making sure that a patient does not miss their retreatments? Let's talk about it, not necessarily just from the clinical view, which I think all of our viewers understand, right? We want them to come back so that they don't have wrinkles. We want them to come back so that they enjoy their filler or they're in compliance. We're not going to talk about that. Jay, one of your lines, not your line, from Jay McGuire. Show me the money. Let's talk
All
about
right.
why this is financially important.
So I'm going to use our neurotoxin for a second as a perfect
Yes.
example, because neurotoxins are usually time dated. All right. The average neurotoxin, and I'm going to be equal to all, whether it's Botox or Dysport or Jeuveau, any of the others, and there are several others, and there are more to come. The average is about 3 months. Now, I am a 10-week person. My wife is about 6 months. So you could never stay in business with having my wife as a patient, except that she would do a lot of procedures so that you
I,
would be able to stay in business. Now,
She offers great referrals. Let's give her credit.
so in the math part of this is if you have a neurotoxin, which is an average of 3 months, understand that if you have that patient that is a regular neurotoxin patient, and it's a 3 months treatment, then they will come back 4 times a year. And if an average neurotoxin patient, average, would spend $500, let's say on 2 areas, I don't go by units, let's just say areas, $500, um, then if you're able to get $2,000 from that patient at $500, 3 months times 4 times. But if you miss one of those treatments and you don't follow up and that patient comes back in 4 months, you're only going to get 3 treatments. 4 months times 3 treatments equals that year versus 3 months at 4 treatments equals that year. So understand that what you have missed at an average of $500 per treatment, and that's just on that one procedure, is $500 per patient per treatment. So think about the amount of neurotoxin, neuromodulator patients that you have that may miss, and multiply that by an average of $500 a treatment, and that can add up to an additional sum of money. Plus, when that person comes in, if they're a shopper for upselling the upsell, they may have also come in for a silk peel, hydrofacial, diamond glow, whatever that name is of the year. And also the additional revenue of skincare product, which we're going to get into, also you're missing. So it's not just that treatment, because if
Mhm.
you are a sharp practice, nobody walks out without a skincare product. If they're coming into you for skin rejuvenation, then you really should be helping them, keeping their skin looking hydrated and youthful by the wonderful products that you sell. So it really compounds itself more. So be sure that you follow up with these people and put them on the schedule before they leave. And also try to make sure that you have a diary so that if they haven't come back and scheduled, that you're somebody in your practice that will call them and will reschedule in that time so that you don't lose the revenue.
And that's where what the final piece to this puzzle that we're talking about, Jay, is when this patient doesn't come back is, also not only automating if a patient is, the day that they're overdue for their procedure and don't have an appointment on a calendar, or that, then 1 month later and 2 months later, and 3 months later. And the beauty of look, I'm going to say it, the beauty of Weave, right, is as with the phone system that is also HIPAA compliant and has HIPAA compliant texting, is that you're able to not only pick up the phone and call that patient because you have done exactly what Jay suggested, which is pull that report for those overdue patients, but also and you should always have in your practice management software how that patient wants to be communicated with. So you may have somebody like Jay who says, look, just pick up the phone and call me already, right? Just pick up the phone and call. And you may have someone like me that says, please don't call me. I just want you to text me. And if you ask Jay, that means sometimes I might text back a day later, right? So, but that Weave offers both. So you are able to to really just send them a quick text as well. So that's where we want to make sure that we're utilizing the technology, especially if they are overdue. So, and not just necessarily when they're due. So when the patient is actually in your practice, I'm going to pull up our next slide here, and we're going to talk about utilizing some questionnaires inside your practice. So there's a couple different questionnaires that we always recommend. So one is that at patient intake, and I'm going to make an addendum to this. At patient intake, you're going to use questionnaires to ask about their other areas of concern, right? So when we talk about other areas of concern, what we really mean by this is what it, if you come in for a neurotoxin, right? We say that you're a brand new neurotoxin patient, but now we want to know, are you also concerned, or would you like more information on dark under eye circles, sagging facial skin, sagging breasts if you're a body, a body plastic or cosmetic body practice, love handles or large pores. So acne, let's think about, and notice that I didn't use brand names, and that's not just because I don't want to violate any agreements that we have. Your patients don't always know the brand name by vendor, right? They just don't, but they know what bothers them when they look in the mirror. And so that's what we always like to talk about. And then in addition, you should be talking to them about those skincare concerns as well, just like Jay mentioned, because it's an additional not only revenue opportunity, but opportunity to keep them coming back in your practice. So we want to talk, and well, Jay, I'll send that one over to you in just a second. But what I finally like to always tell practices is not only should you be doing this upon intake, but you should be doing this when the patient continues to come back. So 3 months later, 3 months later, 3 months later, when that patient comes back. Why is that? Because our bodies change and our skincare needs change and our interest level change. Our comfort with the practice is going to hopefully continue to increase as your practice continues to make that patient feel more comfortable. And we know that what our bodies are maybe needing at 30 is not what they need at 35. And maybe what we're wanting at 35 is not the same as what we want at 40. So just a couple of things there. Of course, we also want post-appointment surveys upon completion so that we can use those and have those sync to all the magical interweb spots. But Jay, can you talk for a minute about the power of selling retail inside a practice? And can you, as always, Jay, talk about it maybe from a dollar sign point of view too?
Well, before I even do that, I'd like to go back and share an additional importance of that questionnaire. When that person came in, your staff may, and I use the word may have done a very poor job in sharing all of the wonderful services that your practice offers. And I'm going to give you a firsthand experience. I had a dermatology, facial body plastic, and cosmetic plastic gynecology practice. And I had dermatology patients asking us if we knew good plastic surgeons. We had plastic surgery patients asking us if we knew good derm. And I realized at that point that I was doing a very poor job in marketing our total services. So I ended up getting the TV screen, in the reception area, and took away all of the magazines so that they were forced to look at our promotional material. It was always changed so that it really always wasn't the same when they come back, unless it was like a week later follow-up. The additional things in the questionnaire: how would a patient know that you introduced either a new skincare product or a new service? It's that beautiful, I'm not going to use any names, the additional laser that performed a different procedure. It's a different radio frequency. It's a different CO2 machine. It's a different genital health enhancement machine. How would they know that? So if you while they're sitting in the reception area, or they're sitting in the exam room waiting for the provider, you ask them again, because what was a concern of them last time could be 3 months, 6 months ago, and you may have gotten a new modality in, and they're unaware of it. Why allow them the opportunity to see it on a billboard or an advertisement and go somewhere else? Because you stand a chance of them not coming back to you if they're introduced to something somewhere else. Now, on the retail side. The retail side offers an enormous amount of revenue and profit, because the average retail on a skincare product is 100% markup with a 50% net margin. Not gross profit, net profit. Net profit is that dollar that actually hits your bank account. So if you're not selling skincare products that equate to approximately 10% of your revenue, it can equate to a lot more. But an average we were doing is 10% of our revenue, and we were doing a lot of revenue. That the idea is that when you're doing that procedure, whether it's your doctor, PA, NP, esthetician, for the modality that you just treated them on, there's always something. Now, we live here in South Florida. If you fail to sell anybody an SPF, you are missing the boat. Because even though I wear a hat, because I don't want my scalp to be fried, all kidding aside, all right, I still put a sunblock on my
And it is one
arms.
beautiful scalp, Jay.
Thank you, Mara. I will still put an SPF on my arms, my hands, and my ankles and my legs. so that, because I still will get that sunline from where my socks are, even on the golf course. So I share this with you because that's where you get the actinic keratosis. That's where you get these precancerous, lesions. So try to assist that person and share with them why that skincare product is best for them, whatever that is. Now, another thing, what you may not realize, just because Mara may have purchased a skincare product the last time she was in for her, she brings it home.
Mhm.
And next thing you know, her teenager looks at it and says, "Oh my goodness, I love that product." The next thing you know, the teenager's using the product. And guess what?
Jay, I don't know
Now,
what you mean. I've never ever had my teenager just be enamored with a product and it just move right down into her medicine cabinet. We've never had that happen around
all right.
here.
And then what happens is now you are out of that product. So it's up to you whether it's on auto ship, all right, or calling the people after they're buying
Mhm.
product. Because when they walk out literally with hundreds of dollars of skincare
Yep.
product, if it's hundreds of dollars at retail, you're making $100 on the profit. Why not call the person afterwards if they haven't been back and say, "Hey, Mara, how are you doing with the skincare product? Would you like to renew it? Would you like us to ship you some more?"
And I will say
I was
that
just thinking about that. Please do.
yes, exactly. And there's a couple components to that too, is that especially if you say, if it's the provider, it is absolutely okay that the provider calls for follow-up care and we consider, I'm just so excited to get this out. We consider these things follow-up care. Or if the provider doesn't have the chance, that the provider will say to another team member, please call. And then the team member says, I was just talking with insert provider's name here. They asked me to call you personally and find out how is your skin doing and if you would really like me to put aside an additional product for your next visit. So I think that the other component too is that when you're filling out this other areas of concern questionnaire slash sheet, and it could be electronic, it could be through your EMR system, it could be through as a PDF, an actual piece of paper, but that needs to actually follow the patient back into the treatment room. It can't be something that just sits, closed off in a file. So otherwise that does no good, right? That is something that the provider can use as additional talking points. And if if the patient decides after their consult that they are not going to move forward with maybe an additional treatment that they hadn't scheduled, but they need to think about it, that somebody calls that patient the next day and says, I know you met with, again, insert provider's name here yesterday. He or she asked me to call you personally. We had an opening come up on our schedule for insert date here, and we would love to get you in. And we know how excited you were about that procedure. And if there's any other questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them. So we want to make sure that we're not just putting that patient's file and name away in a drawer.
Don't let that airplane take off with an empty seat with zero
Exactly.
revenue.
Yes, we are going to take a slight break, a slight intermission, because what kind of business would we be if we didn't tell you about our own services? I want to take a minute and talk to you about the Conversion Cascade course and all that it has to offer. We want you to be trained to acquire loyal patients and boost your revenue in your aesthetic practice. Now, with our Conversion Cascade online course, you and your team will be able to master two key things important to growing your aesthetic practice and becoming successful, acquiring patients and retaining new patients. So let's talk about a couple of things. As a step-by-step sales funnel training, the course is designed specifically to help you and your team attract more patients, convert more calls to consults, convert consults to treatments and procedures, and to keep your patients coming back for more. Not only will our Conversion Cascade course help to strengthen and develop your team's phone and sales skills in order to acquire, convert, and retain loyal patients, it will serve as a valuable onboarding training tool for every new team member that joins your practice. Yes, every new team member that joins your practice. Plus, in the course, you will receive downloadable marketing checklists, phone scripts, conversion tracking tools, and more. So, sign up for the course to get started on increasing your revenue and acquiring and retaining new and existing patients. Yes, how to acquire and how to keep them coming back for more. It only takes approximately 4 hours to complete. You can finish it at your own pace and you'll have lifetime access. Yes, that is for the lifetime of the course. And a special thank you for being our podcast listener. We'll give you 20% off. Yes, 20% off. Just enter the discount code podcast. Yes, podcast to start saving now. So click on the link in our show notes to sign up for the Conversion Cascade online course and start acquiring more patients now.
Jay, I just want to expand on something that, as we had been talking about when it comes to product, and we always, on a side note, we're big fans of a private label, not a private label, but just private label in general. So it's not necessarily that it has to be one brand or the other, but the benefit of private label skincare is that it has, as we're talking about how to keep your patients coming back for more, that particular product will have your branding on it, right? So it serves as a business card that lives in their medicine cabinet, and they won't be as likely to go purchase this through a third party online. And you also need to, quite honestly, educate your patients on why they shouldn't be purchasing it from a random online retailer, maybe one that rhymes with Schmamazon that we all love, right? Great for, I ordered some toothbrushes through there this week, maybe some weed killer. Those things are fine, but not something that you put on your face and your skin. And you need to educate your patients truly on what happens with counterfeit.
Mara,
Now,
you mentioned medicine cabinet, but there are people like you and I who
mhm,
might do 10 to 12 conferences in a year. There are
mhm,
professional business people that may make a dozen or 2 dozen business trips a year. And I will tell you that I have duplicates of
sure,
all of my products, some that stay in the medicine cabinet and others that actually stay in my travel bag
same.
because I don't want to have to worry about forgetting. It's like toothpaste. I have one always in my travel bag. Is
Same.
a deodorant always in the travel bag. So why not buy some extra? And you can either sell them the private label in the private label containers. We call them travel sizes, not samples. They should
Right.
always be travel sizes, kind of like you buy at the supermarket, whether it's shampoo or a hairspray or a deodorant,
Mhm.
maybe the 2 ounces or less that are TSA compliant. It's just an additional revenue stream that keeps your name front and center.
Exactly. And, just some additional verbiage, Jay, to the wisdom you have already imparted on everybody here, right? Is that just some little tips and tricks and additional scripting on top of what you already said was, instead of somebody saying, do you need any additional products, right? That's a yes or no question. That very easily, it's easy to say, no, I'm good. Versus when we talk about, I see the products are working. So you've already credentialed, your skin looks so much better. Look at this, like you're glowing. And so for them to be able to receive that compliment first and say, are we ready to move? Let's move on to the next stage. So maybe the first time they left with the 3 basics, 1 or 2 basics in their skincare, and they said, well, I still have, these other products at home. They're fine. They're not really taking me to the next level, but I'm just going to use them up. And then when I come back, so they might be ready to move on to the next stage there. And always asking them, what are their concerns today? Right. So because their concerns today might be different than their concerns 6 months ago. We live in Florida, Jay, so our skincare concerns are pretty much the same year round. But climate wise, we know that's not always the case. And so especially if you live, in a weather that actually has 4 seasons, it's going to be different, 6 months from now.
Another side of that coin is many times, and I say many, we discontinue offering a specific product for one reason or another. We didn't find that it worked as well, or we found a
Right.
better product. When that happens, make sure that you allow your patient to know, by the way, although the product that we were using for that, you know what, we have a product that we have found that's much better, and
Mhm.
offer them the opportunity, give them a special on that product, because we don't want people to think that product that we sold them the last time wasn't any good.
Right.
We found one that is better, and we'd like to offer you the opportunity as a special promo and get them introduced to the new product of the same like SPF to SPF, toner for
Sure.
toner, blender for blender.
So, Jay, can we also, kind of back into something else that we were talking about? And I guess the short answer is, of course, we can, because it's our webinar. So, yeah, the answer is we're just going to back up a second. When we talk about booking patients let's talk about rebooking them before they leave the practice, right? So they've had and we're not talking about the actual surgical process, right? So I'm not talking about after the consult, then they come back for their pre-op, then they come back for the procedure, then they come back for their post-op. I'm not talking about when they're in that window between pre-op and post-op. But for the others, when they have, we know that the treatments require ongoing maintenance, that this is what happens. So let's, use the same analogy about how do we script it so that a patient, when they have received we're going to say neurotoxin, folks, we always talk about neurotoxin because everybody does it, right? Anybody that we're talking about, we're talking to does this. So they've received their neurotoxin and they're walking out. What are some of your tips and tricks to get that particular patient to book their next appointment so we can maintain the revenue that you were talking about, right? With this 4 treatments, for example, with neurotoxin per year.
Well, it's not any different than when we all go to a dentist. And I know I go to the dentist every 6 months for my semi-annual teeth cleaning.
Mhm.
And as I'm walking out, they want to schedule that 6-month appointment with me. And look, the beauty of having a calendar on my phone is I can
Yeah.
always say, okay. So I say, sure, let's schedule it. And if something comes up, I can always change it. But let's fill our schedule 3 months, 6 months out now. Look, OBGYNs do it all the time, don't they?
I
Whether it's a
was just going
mammogram
to
or a
say,
pap
and we know
smear.
that.
All right, our dentist, get the schedule full. And look, if a person says, well, I don't know if I have it, well, put it on the schedule anyway. And if things change, then we can also alter the schedule. Now, if you have the proper follow-up and we going to remind somebody a week before, 5 days before, 3 days before, the day of, I love those reminders. I'm so busy, and look, all of you are so busy, but seriously, I'm so busy that sometimes with all the reminders, even the day of, I may even forget. And thank goodness to my iPhone or whatever phone you use, it will beep, it will ding, it will flash and tell me. And I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm glad that reminded me. Or my doctor's office sends me texts, reply 1 to confirm, 2 to cancel, 3 to
Sure.
reschedule. At least you have that opportunity to fill your schedule. And then most of the time, people will keep that appointment and be grateful that that appointment's made, because they know that if they're going to call at the last minute, they may not be able to get in. And
Right.
look, although it's a savings for them if they miss the appointment, I will tell you, look, I was frowning. I don't want to miss my Botox appointments. I really
Right.
don't. I'm looking at the 8, 9 weeks. I start to see the wrinkles. I make that phone call right away.
I don't know
And
what
I
you're
call
talking
my
about,
friends.
Jay.
I call my friends and I say, I need to be treated.
Mhm.
I don't want the wrinkles on my face. And many of the patients who do want that will feel the same way and be appreciative too.
Exactly. Exactly. And I want to, talk for a second as we're talking about what a great segue, as we're talking about communication with patients outside of them being in your office, right? And we're talking about reminders and all of these things. But when we talk about communication, Jay, you and I hit on this a little bit, but it's communicating with patients inside their preferred methods, right? Their preferred method of communication, and always store this inside your practice management software, right? How do you prefer we communicate with you, and get their permission on that? So it's not just that. We talked about making sure that if you're texting and messaging, it is HIPAA compliant. A couple other components. I love a good online chat, but only if it is something that makes sense for your practice. You can't have an online chat and no one's ever available for it. And if you're going to go now with, with AI, artificial intelligence, make sure that it's something that is industry specific and actually makes sense for your practice. Otherwise it could go haywire, and we've seen these things go haywire. And I honestly, as your schedule permits, and this is something that it is more difficult when it comes to insurance-based patients, Jay, as you would know, but a self-scheduling option is, I love a good self-scheduling option. We use them within our business. We know a lot of our clients that use self-scheduling options. It has to be something that syncs with your practice management system. But what I will say is that it does become more difficult if you're doing reconstructive work as well, just because the timing is very, very different, and there's all sorts of approvals and things like that. Jay, I want to make sure.
ZocDoc had this down years ago, and I never was a fan of it because I felt people can go in and make appointments and then not show. And that's before then the two-way communication comes in.
Mhm.
But I will tell you what a time saver it really is once the patients get indoctrinated into it, because even in our own consulting business, we can send a link. It's in my email signature. It's in all of our team members' email signatures. You can click that link and make an appointment with me without ever even speaking to me. I love
Yes.
that function. I get a notification. I know my calendar is getting full. In the practice, you have it synced to your practice management software, and you pick and choose the type of the service, and then it will alert you if there's a conflict. Then your team member can then go in and speak to the patient to see whether or not, or A, to confirm, or B, to ask if there's any additional questions about it. All right. It's just a great opportunity.
Let's go in, and I want to just impart one more piece of wisdom when we're talking about the communication. Jay, this is a Jayism if I ever heard one, but it's pick up the phone, right? Pick up. Jay will go, did you call them back? Pick up the phone, Mar. So with that though, I'm going to make an addendum. It could be pick up the phone or send a text if you know that a patient is more comfortable texting. So I will say that. But 3 instances when your patients don't come back for their retreatments, which we have talked about, make sure you're actually, again, pick up the phone or send that outbound text, but it's a personal text this time, not just the necessary reminder through automation. When you have a new device or procedure that you think that patient would enjoy, you know your patients, and you know that if they've had one type of procedure, they're more likely to want another type of procedure. You know, you have all of the birthdays / dates of birth of your patients, so you know their demographic, right? You know age, gender, all of these components, and who might be a fit, who might be a fit for these procedures. So let them know proactively as a VIP.
I'm going to give an example of something. When you have a new device that would benefit your patient, or an event or a procedure that would benefit them. My wife is retired now, but she was a senior executive for 42 years with Bloomingdale's. And that is high-end quality. And I will share with you, she used a term called clienteling. And her management team and staff, when they got whether it's ready to wear and a new designer outfit that is thousands of dollars, a new mattress type, I'm not kidding, 10,000, 15, $20,000 types of mattresses. When they had something that their clients, it was all listed in their system. When you have something, whether it's ready to wear or home goods or furniture or designer items that you know that that client has used, same thing with your patients, types of procedures, pick up the phone and call them one-on-one. Mara, I know that you have loved to have this procedure, that procedure, and I just like to share with you that we're either running a special, not a discount, we're running a special, or we've got a new device in, and we'd love for you to come in and try it. Now, I'm not saying for free. We're offering for a limited time only, but have somebody. I did consulting for a client in Tampa. I'm not going to mention the name. And every time they had an event, they had 2 people clienteling calling every one of those patients and inviting them to the lunch and learn at
Right.
this country club or whatever.
Yes.
They were solidly booked, solidly booked. I will mention the name. It's Dr. Rich Castellano, the Smile Doctor in Tampa. I'm not promoting him. I'm just saying that it was brilliant. They
A great
had
tactic.
100%. They were always booked solid.
With that, Jay, I'm going to, knowing that we are towards the end of our time, and we only have time for minimal questions. So I'm going to go ahead. One of the questions we got, and it was really phrased two ways. It was by two different people. One said, how to deal if a patient is insisting on knowing the price of the services. And the other said, should we list treatment prices on the website? So Jay, do you want to answer this particular question? And you can lead. I'll chime in if I have any additional tidbits.
Yeah, great. Let me take the one about the website first. There is a price transparency app in the marketplace. And the advantage of the price transparency app is that it allows people to know what the ranges of a particular procedure are. And you can't get the price until you put in your name and an email address. Now, I always use, and use a phony name, and then I'll use 2@AOL.com or one of my email addresses, like an AOL.com that I had when I first started using it. However, it's still active. And it's for those types of things that I really don't want people calling me or contacting me. Don't call me, I'll call you. But in order to get that information, price transparency, it was a way for the practice to be able to retrieve, data to put you onto the website or eBlast, because it says in this price transparency app that you, by submitting your name and your address, it allows us to contact you. Now, to the second question, no, I do not believe with posting prices on my website. I believe in getting the people to call. If you post a price on a website, and there are people that will differ with me, and that's okay. But if you post a price on a website, it's not always the same. How much is Botox? How much is Dysport? Well, until I see you as a prospective patient,
I agree.
I don't know whether or not you need 20 units, 30 units, 50 units. And if I give you my prices, now you're going to price shop me with somebody else. And you know what? Medicine's not an exact science, and one price does not fit all. All right. So I believe in calling the office. And most of the time, we're always going to say, we'd like to come in, have you come in. But if I can at least get you to call, that's the first step in me getting your name and contact information to at least, if you don't want to buy from me now, at least let me communicate with you for you to buy from me later. But I can just blow you off if I post a price on my website, and what was good for one is not good for everybody. And I may turn you off strictly by sharing a price that's not applicable to you.
And one of the next questions that I have, and I'm not quite sure, the meeting could go two very, very different ways, is that somebody said, hi, I feel that self-scheduling online makes up for more no-shows. I don't know if that means you think that when people schedule online, there's a higher no-show rate, or it means that when people can schedule online, it makes up for the fact that other people do no-show. So I'm not quite sure where that means. What I have found is that it's not necessarily just allowing somebody to schedule online, but it's making sure that there are the exact same confirmation measures, and maybe you add in an additional appointment confirmation measure from something that's scheduled online as you would if they actually picked up the phone and called. So it's not necessarily that they scheduled online and then they don't receive any confirmations. They still need all the confirmations. You still need to speak with them, or be in contact with them the day before, 2 days before, et cetera. So they still need to confirm their appointment manually, not necessarily just, it can't be a set it and forget it. So those are
You're making a big mistake if you allow somebody to schedule without following up with them.
Correct.
Many times you will get the patient who wants Botox in their lips to give them fuller lips. Now we know
Or
that's
any
not.
or any neurotoxin. We will say we're
I'm
not
sorry. Yeah, yeah. Well, now
not
we know
biased.
that that's not true. The only time you're going to want it in your lips maybe is if you want a lip lift. However, they may not know that they're doing the right. So why waste that consult? So follow up with them. In our online scheduling program to contact us, we have blocks in there. What is it that you want to have a consult with us about? It
Mhm.
allows us to know, because if they're going to contact us about a procedure or a service that we don't offer, I want to know that I'm going to call them back and take that off the schedule, as not to fill up a schedule. Let me take another question. How
Let's
do I
go.
make sure that my,
Oh no, Jay, I was going to give you a different one if that's okay.
go
Because
on.
we have two coming in. So one of the attendees said, "Do you recommend charging for consults?" We don't, but we do charge for no-shows by collecting credit card information at the time the consultation is scheduled. This turns off some prospective patients. Jay, I want you to be the one to answer this one because there's scripting things we need to put in there. There's security things we need to put in there. So come on, Jay, this one's on you.
Well, you are setting yourself up for a chargeback if you charge somebody for a no-show. Because in that no-show, you have to prove that you have shared with that person that if they don't show, that they're going to be charged. Now, I know this is something in the industry, but unless you have a no-show policy that is documented and signed, you will never win that dispute, all right? Because it does say that with hotels, and that if you don't show and you have to put your credit card information, it tells you that. In my former practice, I listed it, and I said that if you don't show, that money is donated to charity, either of your choice or my choice. All right. And then people didn't feel so bad about it. So, I'm not one, if you're going to make that, if do you charge for the consultation, depending upon who it's with. All right.
Yeah.
If you can rebook that time, I would charge for the consultation and apply it towards the fee, depending upon the type of service that you're going to provide.
I would also, Jay, like to, because this is a disclosure that I think we all just assume, and I don't know if you disclosed it at the beginning. I know unfortunately, I did not. When you referred to your former practice, do you want to give your disclosure?
Oh, yes, I always make a disclaimer when I refer to my former
Disclaimer,
practice.
sorry, yes.
Yeah, I am neither a physician or an attorney. All right. In the state of Florida, you can be a partner in a medical practice. There's the corporate practice of medicine. It is allowed here in Florida. In many states, it is not. In many states, it is without an MSO, Management Service Organization, with an MSA, and Management Service Agreement. So when I refer to mine, I never, ever want to allude to the fact that I am a physician. And I do make that disclaimer at every open lecture that I give. And I do give a lot of legal opinion or legal advice. I am not an attorney, nor am I licensed to practice law.
Right. So that's where I wanted to just make sure we got that, because honestly, I was so excited for the content. I jumped right in and didn't give you a chance to make your disclaimer. So Jay, we have one final question and then we will wrap up this wonderful hour. So the question is, how do I make sure my staff does what they're supposed to? I can't do it all. Jay, I don't know what they're talking about. Clearly, I mean, no one has this problem. I obviously say in jest because this is the problem every practice has. So how do I make
I
sure my
actually
staff
love, I actually love that question
Good,
because,
good. Well, now you get to answer
uh,
it live.
in order to be able to get your practice to do what they're supposed to do, there's several things. Number one, there's a thing called the job description. And in every offer letter that we create, all right,
Mhm.
in every offer letter that we create, we put a job description now so that nobody can ever say that's not my job.
Yep.
That's the four hatred words other than no problem. I hate those versus my pleasure.
Right.
Now, if a person and you give a job description, and then the last thing is, and other duties as assigned, because in order for that person, to do what they're supposed to do, they have to know what they're supposed to do. And then
Yes. Yes.
every practice must have standard operating procedures and policies, procedures, and protocols, PPP, policies, procedures, and protocols that
Yes.
are clear, concise, and consistent. So
And
you have PPP with CCC. I sound like I'm speaking to either my dog or a 5-year-old. But seriously, but seriously, folks, you have to let people know what they are responsible for, and that there is a tolerance, a zero tolerance for insubordination, because the owner or administrator or manager should not be doing it all. So the person that says all of this sounds great but overwhelming, where do I start? You need to have standard operating procedures. You need to have policy, procedures, and protocols that are clear, concise, and consistent. If you don't have them, contact a consultant, contact a management team like ourselves. We have a tool library of over 300. And if we don't have what you need, we'll write one for you, is what we do for our clients. No one should ever, one more second, Mar, no one should ever walk away saying that they didn't know what they were supposed to do. Even if it's, how do I take a picture for a neurotoxin? I'll show you what camera you're using, I'll show you the room you're using, and I'll show you every angle that you're supposed to be taking it at. And if you don't have that, that's where you're missing the boat.
And I will say that having all of these scripts, and just like Jay said, having the protocol, right? So having the script for how to answer the phone, when do you transfer? How do you, all of these things. I will say, again, this is a we've sponsored lecture, so I'm allowed to use them by name, is that what we always recommend is making sure that those calls are being recorded. No, it's not weird or awkward. Look, we call customer service, and they always say this call may be recorded for quality assurance. Well, you want to make sure you're performing quality assurance. And again, with Weave, it is HIPAA compliant. So there is that added benefit and bonus. And with that, make sure that you're listening to those phone calls, and you want to look at the analytics attached to the phone call, right? With the question being, how do I know if my team is doing what they're supposed to? Well, how many calls are going unanswered during peak times? How many, what are the times that the calls go unanswered? Do they go to voicemail? Are they, are calls being returned? How many inbound versus how many outbound calls? So are they making those outbound calls? Are you forwarding the call off site during after hours, so that for maybe from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., if somebody calls, a team member is able to handle that? What happens with with texting? You're able to monitor that with a quality assurance. So I think all of those measures being put into play to get the analytics, check the data, record the calls, all of those components, and spot check. Have your team members listen to their own calls, because we're critical of ourselves. So rather than you say, oh, well, Mara, you missed this and this and this, it's, hey, Mara, I want you to listen to this call. I want you to listen, or have them monitor and listen to 3 or 4 of the calls per week, and have them report back. How do they think that they did? And how do they want to improve? So with
in
that,
the 1 minute we have left, let me give you your 4 top priorities in
yes.
the world, in this business. Number 1, safety and protection of your patient and your employees. Number 1 priority. Number 2, protection of your practitioner's licenses. Number 3, have fun. And number 4, make money and treat your business like the business that it really is.
Yes. Thank you, Jay. I always love being able to do this with you. And it's, we've always talked, and we always say that even as like our roles and responsibilities change over the years, and as our company grows this many years in, I still always love being able to do this with you. So thanks for joining each other and us being able to do this. And if you are glorious listeners also loved listening to us, I want to give you this opportunity, because what would I be if I didn't tell you where you could find us next? We, Shorr Solutions, the podcast where you can listen to Jay and I communicate and share our thoughts and banter, because, well, he is my dad, and what would the communication be without some banter? And if you have any additional questions, we are more than happy to offer you a free 30-minute consult.